That's exactly why the U.S. Navy and the United States Marine Corps have prioritized unmanned systems as key enablers for their missions. This panel brings together stakeholders from across the Department of the Navy to articulate their challenges, explain how the Navy is adapting to overcome them, and share how they are partnering with innovative companies to adopt new capabilities in this space. Let's turn to our panelists, who will introduce themselves before diving into what promises to be an engaging session. National Tech Bridge Director Whitney Tallarico will be moderating this session, which includes the following panelists: General Frank Kelly, Vice President of the Defense Acquisition University; Captain Michael Brasseur, Commodore Task Force 59. Are you calling in from Bahrain, Commodore? I don't know if he's online yet. And Olinda Rodas, Human Factors Engineer at the Naval Information Warfare Systems Command.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So I've been watching a bunch of presentations. I know I presented earlier. There's a lot of dry stuff. I want this to be completely fluid. I want people asking questions. This is kind of a badass panel. The people here have a range of experiences that are kind of insane. Frank, you were the one who set up the first unmanned task force for the Department of the Navy and the Pentagon. Is that how we'll introduce you for today?
Apparently that's how you just introduced me. So I better go with it. So when you say I was the first, I was also the last. And my therapist says it's good for me to come to panels like this and talk about it.
Perfect. Well, perfect, because you're passing the torch to a lot of folks in the Pentagon, but also this guy over here. So Captain Brasseur, or now Commodore Brasseur of the Unmanned Task Force 59 and 5th Fleet in the Middle East. Brand new effort. You're going straight into the thick of it. So, where are you from?
Well, Whit, really good to see you. For the audience, Whit was out here about 8 weeks ago, which seems like yesterday, for our design sprint for the new task force. I'm here in Bahrain, not San Diego, but I can wish about that. Out here in Bahrain, just stood up a new task force on unmanned and artificial intelligence. As I mentioned, we had about 8 weeks ago, we had a kind of a who's who in AI and unmanned, helped design the task force. And ever since we finished the design sprint, we've been getting after it. We've got some really exciting kit coming out, and will be operational in the next couple of weeks. So.
Awesome. And more to follow on that. There's a great exercise coming up early next year, IMX 2022, and some other great demonstrations of international collaboration that I hope all of you get up to speed on. So last but not least, on our panel here is Olinda Rodas. She's at the Naval Information Warfare Center. For those who don't know what those are, they're basically Navy labs who work on amazing technology to keep providing those capabilities to the fleet and to be that first conduit for you guys to work with them in industry and academia. So Olinda, a little bit about you.
Sure. So thank you for having me here, Whitney. So I'm a human factors engineer. So I'm really focused in the user and getting the warfighter stories out there to try to really tackle the challenges from their point of view. So the implementation and transition of technologies goes smoothly. So.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Olinda. And she's been doing an incredible job working directly with end users. So Marines, sailors who have problems come to Olinda, kind of walk through that process of what their challenges are. And then she's been really helpful in seeding some of the innovation that comes out of it. And then also finding really cool ways for not just the Naval Information Warfare Center in San Diego to get involved, but also other groups across the Department of Navy. So just so you guys know, I want a ton of questions coming in. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat here so that we don't leave one behind. But I guess first question for the group, and I think I'll start with Frank, and we'll go in the same order for this one. But why is unmanned so important right now? Why do we need to get this right? So Frank, to you first.
I think really right now, and maybe 4 years ago and maybe 10 years ago, the threat drives everything, and we can't have we can't have unlimited manpower. So we've got to think about how we're going to respond to that threat. And obviously, I think that unmanned systems are as a complement to our sailors and Marines, if we're just going to focus, on the Department of the Navy right now, add a dimension that doesn't just replace humans in those dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs, if we want to be a little cliche about like an old term, but can actually, in partnership, with the humans, the sailors and Marines out there, really provide an exponential response to the threat. The other thing that I'll say is that there's a couple of other things too that I think that, I mentioned my therapist telling me I can talk about it now. The technology is way more mature than it used to be. I think back in the day, so one of the jobs that I had a million years ago as a lieutenant colonel, I was also the first unmanned systems program manager for the United States Marine Corps. I was so excited about that. But here again, I was also the last program manager for unmanned systems in the Marine Corps. And everybody thought, Frank, we're going to do robots, right? Because we're the Marine Corps. And I said, no, we're going to do it all. And the other thing is that we have unmanned systems technology that's applicable in all domains. I can't think of a service other than the Department of the Navy that is to operate in all domains, including space. So, and I think that the attitude in the Navy right now is primed for it. We've got our warfare centers that are geared to provide the kind of support that they need. We've got a command now. I mean, if somebody said, Frank, you could go back, but you can't be a general officer, I'd say, man, I will be Michael Brazier. I will be a captain in the Navy and take his job because he's got the coolest job, but probably one of the most important jobs that we have in the United States Navy right now. He's clearly leading the Department of the Navy into what the future of warfare is going to be. Thanks for letting me talk.
General, I would just, first of all, just like to associate myself with your remarks. I feel really, really honored to be in this position. As you mentioned, we, especially here in the Fifth Fleet, it's I would say a problem-rich environment. It's kinetic. The resources are limited. The space is large. The problems aren't going away. So this, it's almost like necessity's the mother of invention, and we have to solve these problems. And Unmanned gives us an ability to enhance kind of the human machine teaming aspect, or the human unmanned teaming. So I think it's really out of necessity we have to do this. General, you'd be happy to know that we're teaming with the Marines, who brought some really cool technology over here. Some VBATs, vertical takeoff, UAVs. We're teaming with them already. We've got some really exciting kit coming out here, and it's all about getting in the hands of the end users. We think we know what they'll do with it, what we'll do with it, but never underestimate, a sailor or a Marine with a problem. They'll always find a new way to solve that problem. We're just trying to accelerate getting the kit in the hands of the end users. And we also, we're unmanned in artificial intelligence. So the big flick for us is fusing all these different sensors, getting the data in a form that's usable and ready to be exploited with AI and ML, and then getting into the predictive space where we're on the right side of the problems rather than trailing the problems. So, Whitney, the time is now, and we really appreciate you pushing stuff forward to us fast, so we can learn fast, give you the feedback, and we can kind of iterate and improve very, very fast.
Absolutely. Olinda, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think what they were saying is obviously right on target. I mean, the necessity is like the main thing, and the other thing that I see is also kind of a safety component out of it. So the machine can do, a lot of things better than us, and it can protect the human as well. So from that point of view, I think is very effective. And in what Michael was saying about AI and keeping the human in the loop. I think with AI, there's a lot of possibilities that the machine can help us with a lot of things, but it's really important to keep the human in the loop, because at the end, the human is going to be interacting with the agent. So I think that's really, really key to the design cycle. That's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, feel free to put questions in. I have plenty, so don't worry. And anyone on the panel, if you're interested in posing any to the group, feel free. But I did want to say, with the fleet perspective, Frank, who's kind of been, general, sorry, but who's been kind of on all different aspects, and I've seen really as a mentor in this process, or this latest rendition of unmanned efforts coming forward. Are there some key critical problems that we can share today that we know unmanned systems could probably solve now? And what are some of those ways that we could bring people in faster from your experience? I think I'll start with Michael.
Okay, thank you, Whitney. So yeah, I could probably list off about 10 problems that we're dealing with over here. Recognizing we're in an unclassified setting, the big problem that we're trying to focus on is enhancing maritime domain awareness. Again, it comes down to, our ability to know what's out there is reduced, by the number of assets we have. So if we have less assets, we see less. Unmanned, the type of technologies we're looking at are the dual use, maritime robotics, very inexpensive, allow us to get a lot of sensors in the water. When you partner with allies and partners, that gives you a chance to scale quickly. When you scale quickly, you can start to close some of those maritime domain awareness gaps. And then you can help, ultimately, you want to deter the illicit and malign activity that's happening over here, whether it's, on the low end, illegal fishing, on the high end, weapons transfers, supporting the Houthis in, the Southern Red Sea. So it's the full spectrum, but for us, it comes all the way down to maritime domain awareness, knowing what's going on, and then being more precise with the manned assets. So,
so I'm just going to pull a few threads in there, Michael. So for the groups in the room and for folks listening online, I think a lot of people, when they hear unmanned, don't see themselves in it. Maybe because there's no man in unmanned. Okay. But also because, it doesn't really encompass all of the stuff that goes into it. It's sensors, it's materials, it's batteries, it's data sharing, it's training, and it's the thought that people across the Department of Navy need to make a shift, and Congress needs to be ready for a shift as well for budget transfers from thinking about training equipment and then thinking about smaller things that you can expend or use for certain use cases, and then say, okay, what's next? What can we buy next? So it's a huge mind shift. Alinda, with your experience talking with folks about their challenges, directly, and trying to curate those into technical requirements and finding ways to kickstart these efforts, where do you see the opportunities for us?
I see a lot of opportunities by, working together, but kind of creating the pipeline from the Warfare Center that we have direct contact with the users into the academia and industry. So as you know, we talk about different opportunities for challenges that goes from us and then expand into the same topics, expand into the academia and industry. So I think there's a lot of good opportunities, because industry and academia can tackle things that we cannot tackle as fast or as good. So I think if we get united and work together, we will be able to get the technology on time to the warfighters when they need it, not too late. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Just a matter of putting the programs together and working together.
Yeah. So, Linda, you're talking about the role of the warfare centers kind of being that interface between the technology community and the private sector, as well as
Mhm.
the Marines and sailors who need this equipment. I think it's important for folks to know that it's even difficult. I'll say I've had difficulties with a lot of folks across the department trying to figure out what tools we have in our toolbox to
Mm.
solve these problems. So maybe Michael has use cases and he's got real needs and he's got an amazing 3-star admiral ready to go and say, yeah, I'll sign off on all of these ways to deliver technology faster. I'll accept that risk. But then, how do you push that into the community where it takes us some time to get things on contract, or we have to negotiate things? We have to work with congressional intent for resources we have. We have a budget cycle that usually predicts things 3 years out. And I'll say from my perspective, we've been trying really hard to pool all the more flexible pots of money into alignment. And I know there's a group now, the Unmanned Task Force, working with everyone across the Pentagon and the end users and the technology community. But it's not easy. And so, Frank, from your perspective, I know you've talked about this before, but how are we going to do better as a team, and how can we more quickly bring technology to the warfighters based on what you've seen today?
I mean, there's so much here. So I'll just start from what could have been perceived as resistance, let's say some years ago, and it could be a lot of things. Don't want to be replaced by a machine. The technology's not there. The risk is too much for me to bear. And I think that the four of us on screen here, and I don't know how many people are out there, can probably say that, hey, there's a lot of things that are now not as not as dangerous or as risky as they were before. So Whitney, you've heard me call out this one guy's name, and his name is Dave Mindell. And Michael, if I could just suggest one. By the way, I got a million of them, and I would love, and I want to help you out, man, as much as I possibly can. And then I want to take your job, okay? But his name is Dave Mindell. He's a professor out at MIT. He is a professor out at MIT. He started his own company called Humanics that does microlocation, and he does that to help support unmanned system integration in urban environments. So he's looking at a social aspect of that. But Mindell wrote a book, and I'd encourage all of us to read it. I promise I'll read it again. And it's called Our Robots, Ourselves, The Myth of Autonomy. And he the first time I ever met this guy, he just slapped this book on a table and said, "You read it." And I'm like, "Oh, perhaps you don't know who I am. You don't tell me what to do." And I was so bummed that I delayed like 1 minute in not having read his book. And it's a fantastic book. And the first chapter starts out with 4 questions. The first question, when you talk about unmanned systems and autonomy, is where are the humans? The minute you ask that question, you disarm the folks that have a fear about unmanned. And then you immediately get the humans into it. And that changes the entire sense of the conversation that you're about to have. So Whitney, with the Unmanned Task Force, we got 2 folks that are in the lead, but lots of folks supporting, right? So we got Michael Stewart and we have Paul Mann. And Whitney and I had a chance to see these guys kick off an event at Naval X. Actually, I had a chance to see it. She was helping to run the thing. And I suggested to Paul Mann and Mike Stewart, hey, the first person you want to talk to is Dave Mindell. That's the first thing I like to do. The other thing that I think is really important is go and talk to the folks at AUVSI, the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. They have access to the Department of Navy through a thing called the Maritime Advisory Committee that was actually set up to address Navy needs. That's really, really important. AUVSI also has access to academia and tremendous access to the industrial base. And then the last thing I'm going to say, like I could go on all day about this stuff. Reps and sets. Get a lot of this stuff in the hands of sailors and Marines. And just like, the task force commander over here has told us all, You will be amazed what sailors and Marines will do with that stuff. Just let it happen, and they will solve a lot of our problems for us.
Yeah. Amen. There's I know, Mike, you might want to respond. There are a few questions coming up for you. So I was going to take some from the audience. First one is about what the first steps your task force will take to start learning how to use unmanned for maritime domain awareness, like specific problems you're trying to tackle, which I know you started, but.
So just like the general said, getting the kit in the water as soon as possible. You know, we thanks to Whitney and a really good team, we were able to get some really exciting kit out here within the span of 5 weeks. You know, Admiral Cooper, during our design sprint, you know, drew out one of the problems on the board, and then, you know, we all collectively thought, okay, well, how could we help solve this problem with some technology that's available now? So that's coming out, some USVs, some UAS, and some companies that do AI and C2. So we're going to start small with some USVs, start to build trust in the human machine team. As we build trust, we'll scale up with more capable assets, USVs and UASs, and then we'll start to put it on real missions. We're also in parallel working with our partners in the region to help us scale. So there's a lot of interest in unmanned over here. And once you start bringing in partners, you can scale and then start to close some of those gaps. So that's our approach. Start small, build trust, build confidence in the machines, and then scale up, and then scale across with partners and allies. I hope that answered the question. Did you think that nailed it, Whitney, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. And I think it's worth noting too that as Michael's alluding to, and I was trying to stay out of it and just be the facilitator, but our Tech Bridge team is definitely heavily involved in this. Actually, on Monday, we're going to bring our team together, go over problems in a classified setting, and then take some of these opportunities and say, hey, what of these things maybe needs to stay in government in the classified setting for a little bit, and how many of these things can we put out to industry now and get things on contract? We have authorities. If you guys are there and you have a prototype, you want to get it tested, you know, cooperative research and development agreements, there's something called 2373 where we can just buy a prototype and see if it works in a setting. We've got all these contracting vehicles available or things that are able to be set up to really integrate new technologies faster. So, and exactly what you're saying in terms of partnerships, these aren't just our problems. And the technology solutions aren't only going to solve Navy needs, like the fishing, illegal fishing problem. It's a global challenge. So I think the more we find alignment and create those avenues for partnership, you know, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, and Whitney, if I can just come back to you on that, because when you have these people overfishing, right? They're taking away people's ability to provide for their families. Fishermen, when they can't fish, will look for other things to do to provide for their families. So it's, basically it causes an increase in insecurity, which, trends towards conflict or malign activity. And so, back in the day, a lot of the pirates were, fishermen that couldn't fish because the waters off the coast of Somalia were being overfished. And, so just, it's all interconnected. And while that illegal fishing may not seem like a big deal, it's a very big deal, especially in this region where people make their living, on the water. So.
Yeah, and last thing I'll add for that. So this is a great example of some of our challenges in the Middle East. A lot of these challenges, technical challenges, also exist, and operational challenges exist in other locations. So what we are trying to do as a team is create like a streamlined approach to solving these problems, find out what works here and scale the solutions elsewhere. Find out, maybe it's really hard to test something operationally in Fifth Fleet for a certain challenge, but maybe we can test it in one of our test beds at a warfare center, or have curation events to figure out, what are those limiting factors in each of these scenarios, and how do we really invest more in the industrial base to get there. Yeah, so I think there's another question as well. When referring to unmanned systems, this is for you again, Mike. How much of those are autonomous or have full autonomy capability today? And how do you foresee autonomy's role in future unmanned systems?
Okay, so great question. What we, kind of the history is, a lot of maritime robotics, controlled by one person. So if you got, 10 vehicles, you got 10 operators. We're more going to a C2 infrastructure that has multiple vehicles controlled by one person, leveraging, AI to do that. And we're going to be testing that within the next 5 months. So that's the desired end state from the C2 perspective. From the actual robots themselves, the level of autonomy is actually going to be pretty high with the systems we're getting. So I would not say fully autonomous, but we are not talking about remote controlled stuff. We're talking about, autonomous stuff. Again, I'm being kind of vague because I'm kind of not mentioning the systems we're talking about. But the desired end state, as I mentioned at the beginning, is, one human overseeing a C2 structure enabled by AI that's got control of lots of systems, unmanned systems, to accomplish, to deliver an effect for the warfighter.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think the crawl, crawl, there we go, walk, run. It's a really good approach, especially since we're trying to do the opposite of what the Navy traditionally does, which is prepare for this giant system years in advance and say, hey, this is how it's going to look. I want a fully autonomous vessel this size that can do all of these missions. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to figure out is, what are our problems? How many of them are we solving now? Where are inefficiencies? And how many things could we get out there, knowing that our humans, the cost of life is high and the cost of these systems can be small and they can save lives. So I think that, even just picking one or two areas to start and improving out these capabilities is definitely the right approach. Yeah, Olinda, looks like you have something.
I'm just thinking, like, to be able to say what Michael was talking about is what we call supervisory control, right? But you have one human controlling multiple vehicles. And the type of technology that you need for supervisory control is kind of different from the one that you will need if just one-on-one. So I think that just kind of thinking about, the different kind of technologies that we will need to develop to get there. And at the same time, I'm thinking, like, when Mike is talking about, particular scenarios, it would be nice to have, like, more particular scenarios or vignette that we can kind of focus on, and then kind of break it down in the type of technologies that you will need for each. Because, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
And Olinda, that was actually one of the outputs that our team, started at design sprint, basically our top 10 problems and vignettes. And, I'll pass what we put together a playbook on that, and I'll pass that to you.
Yes.
And it's just the entering argument, just a quick tour around the AOR, and how we thought Unmanned could help us solve some of those problems. And then, how we intend to employ the new assets that we have and leverage the existing assets, because there's a bunch of, legacy kit in here that still performs a very valuable function.
Yeah,
it's low cost. And then once you kind of leverage in that C2 and AI aspect, you really get a lot from those additional sensors.
Yeah, I see. And again, I'm just kind of thinking about like, the different kind of requirements. I mean, from us that, we do science and research, right? We have an innovation program now in which we try to run these like what we call design thinking workshops. And we have like scenarios, and when we have a bunch of scientists and engineering working on trying to solve the problem that the scenario displays. So and the thing that we are kind of identifying, I guess it was kind of, we knew, but it wasn't so clear. It's like, there are all these kind of different problems. It might be technical problems, but then when you get users in there, you have more of like, the user problems. And then if you got program office people in there as well, then you have all the other problems. So our issue is like, how do we integrate all the different requirements? Because, as the S&T folks, how do we navigate to that? Because we kind of want to make everybody happy, right? So you kind of have to prioritize, if you will, the requirements. So just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're just happy to be part of the conversation so we can provide valuable feedback. What's interesting is a lot of the stuff we have coming out is, capability as a service, a lease. If it doesn't provide value, we'll say, thank you very much. We'll look another direction. So I think that's also, we're not committed to this stuff. If it provides value to the end user, to us, if it helps us solve problems, we'll say more of it, and we'll ask Navy to transition. So that's kind of the approach.
And I think the question of value is also depending on the design. Because if you give the user a particular design, if you put like, different technology together in a package and you give the package to the user, you might get a reaction. If you put them in a different way and then you might get a different reaction. So what I'm saying is like the requirements from the user might or the impression might be depending on what the package, how do you put the design together? So that's kind of also important, because what we're trying to do is pick, kind of different technology and kind of package them together in a way that help them do their task and their mission. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because even at a warfare center, the folks working on technology are working directly with industry and academia on providing these technology packages or kits of equipment over to the fleet. We have a lot of the same challenges, getting feedback, getting our business case accepted by higher ups, getting funding, finding opportunities. So I just want to stress again, since we're talking to a lot of startups, a lot of companies who want to work with us, what we're trying to do with this group is really open up the aperture to communicate across completely different silos internally, and then working better with other defense partners and with non-traditional members of the innovation industrial base. So yeah, Frank, I actually wanted to ask you this question that was coming through. I guess it's from LinkedIn. But what is your take on this hyperwar or hashtag hyperwar future? Winglong 2, I'm going to say some stuff wrong here. Now armed with air-to-air missiles, collaborative swarms of inexpensive UCAVs, running sensor fusion, simulation, and optimization at the edge.
So I saw that one out there, and I said, "Wow, there's some ugly elements to that." One of the things we didn't talk about yet is arming these things, weaponizing these things, and now this is one where I think attitudes are really going to have to change, and we've got to also face the realization that we're going to come to a point. I don't know if it's another singularity or however you want to state it, but humans are not going to be able to compete in the same decisions, just the decision cycles that these machines. Michael talked about incorporating AI on board. Pretty soon, we're going to have to think of another way. So there is an instruction out there, the 3000.09, that talks about how the human is going to have to stay in the loop. And so So I have an idea based on my time, flying around, and I think we've got to rethink, when does the mission start? The mission doesn't start when wheels are in the well and you've left, and you've left, the surly bonds of Earth, so to speak. Now, mission starts now during mission planning, and I'm sure that there's some smart people out there that can realize it's even before that. When you decide to commit forces, the mission has started. And think about that. We're executing missions today in all sorts of other environments. Okay. But those decision cycles are getting faster and faster. And I think that we as humans are going to have to think about, how is it that we, can direct that fight, even though we might not be able to participate in those fast cycle times. So one thing that I thought that just came up between Alinda and Mike that was really important is, if we wait around and say to ourselves, we have to have the hardware. Now, that's not what you guys were saying, but I just want us to think about this for a second. We have to have the hardware, and then we have to give it, to the human beings so that they can actually plop it in the water or let it fly around in the sky. I think we're missing a great opportunity here. You guys have also done a great job of mentioning at scale. I got a lot of kids in my house. They're not kids anymore. They're young adults. As a matter of fact, I have 3 second lieutenants in my house waiting to start the basic school. They play a lot of games, and they play a lot of games with like thousands and millions of other people. If we could think about creating a virtual environment where we could weaponize the assets in the virtual environment. The other thing we could also do is help these game players out there. And by the way, our sailors and Marines play a lot of games too. Get the data that tracks, like, they made a decision to employ one asset over another. Why did they do that? The scale is out there. I think that the opportunity is out there. And I think that the gaming environment or that virtual environment, but I do think gaming is very attractive as well. Could really help us out. So Whitney, you're tapped into all the tech bridges and all that. And so Diana Teal is down there in Orlando. Orlando is like the virtual gaming center of the universe down there. And so they're also tapped into, think of the potential we could have here in the live, virtual, and constructive environments. So Alinda might only be able to work on a few assets. Michael might only be able to get a few assets available. But in that virtual and constructive environment, we can augment that by model-based systems engineering and see how that plays out. And I think we're very, very mature in at least in the Department of the Navy. I'll be a little biased there. I think that our warfare centers are absolutely fantastic, and especially with our folks that have been on the bleeding edge of that whole live, virtual, constructive environment that we can have out there. So some really good points. I'm really excited. I do think that we probably need to move a little bit faster though in getting that sort of structure in place. Over.
So Whitney, I just wanted to add, with respect to the hyper war, so we just finished, our longest war here. The next war is going to be fought at machine speed, no doubt about it. And, as the general mentioned, you're going to bump into some very serious ethical questions really fast. And we're already anticipating that. We have an advisor from the Jake on our team who's a world leader in autonomy and ethics, a PhD in law. So we're already anticipating these things, before we put them in the water, and thinking, as the general mentioned, the secondary, the tertiary effects. And I really like the notion of the live virtual environment to learn, to understand the human behavior about the decisions that are being made. So just wanted to add those few points on there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And Marie Broussier, I think it's pretty French, but then again, I thought your name was French too, Michael, and I'm getting that wrong. I still say Broussier, but it's apparently
Broussier. Say right.
All right. Well, regardless, I think it's really fascinating. So there's a few things that I think people will be excited about in industry and academia. One is this partnership with live virtual constructs. So for those who aren't tracking the things like digital twin or digital engineering or, AR, VR, what we're trying to do is create these simulated environments where we could test things and, before we put them in the field. And we're taking kind of models of different environments and trying to sensor them so that we can see in real time in the physical. Also, a lot of the same results in the virtual, so we can run simulations and do a lot of learning faster. I think this is really critical on the ethics side so that we don't put things out there that might be not ready or might have unintended consequences. But additionally, it's a way for us to start opening the door for everyone from STEM careers to folks who have technology ready to go to test things in a lower barrier environment earlier. So I will say folks who have tried or who have successfully worked with the Navy Marine Corps before and have a hard time when it comes to getting data on problems or on environments, that is a huge thing we are working on now, trying to capture these data points, these data sets to share. It is not easy, I will say, on our team and some others to create a backbone that allows sharing of data, but that's also an ask. So if you guys have data sets of, lakes, oceans, like different environments if you're doing something and you have your own sort of models or simulated environments or AR, VR that you're using in private industry for things like maintenance and sustainment or for training, please reach out. Yeah, not TST in Orlando, a part of our Central Florida Tech Bridge, is heavily involved in this space. And I was just in Seattle last week visiting our Northwest Tech Bridge director, and I think Microsoft can't remember all the other Game Boy. I don't know what these things are. I'm clearly out of the loop and I need to get back in. But these are the companies we need to be partnering with to figure out, or companies like them to really start figuring out how to bring not just technology forward, but the way that we interact with it and the way that we harness what's possible forward. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. And I'm not seeing any other questions. So what I would like to do is just around the table. I might start with you, Olinda. Just have folks say, hey, what is one thing that stresses you out when it comes to unmanned? And then maybe what is one area where you think private industry and academia who might be listening could engage with us?
I think in the supervisory control, there are a lot of like different areas that definitely academia can help and have been helping, different projects with ONAR and DARPA so far. So the interaction with the human is one area. The other area is like the integration of data. We're getting a lot of data. So how do we show, okay, the machine learning can do the integration of data. Well, how do we communicate that to the human? So visualizations. That's a really big area also. We want the operators to be able to see, what the agent is thinking. Why is it thinking like that? What type of data is integrated? Mm-hmm. And so that part is crucial to what Mike was talking. I've been in many projects with unmanned vehicles, and one of the main issues with AI was trust. They didn't want to use it because they didn't understand how the agent was making the decision. So being able to communicate kind of AI way that can communicate to show the human, this is what I'm thinking, and in a way have to think in a way that the human can understand. Because if we say, I'm integrating millions of data, I say, well, I can't relate to that. So it have to be related to the human, but you have to be able to communicate visualizations. Just the whole thing of supervisory control is being able to have situational awareness also. So situational awareness, you have to integrate different type of data. So there's a big area there that definitely academia and industry are way ahead of us, and they can help us. And we do a lot of creatives, and we try to do creatives with industry, with academia. So there are a lot of opportunities out there to to work with us. That's all.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I'm just going to pull one quick thread on that because we've been talking about technology, science, and all those things. But I think all of us recognize the power of video, of good design. We wouldn't be able to figure out our phones, or maybe our parents wouldn't be able to figure out their phones if it wasn't so intuitive. So whoever is out there on the creative side as well, we're STEAM fans, not just STEM fans. And a lot of those seemingly lost arts like communication are really critical. So definitely awesome. Thank you. Let's go with Frank next.
And we're thinking about the stuff that's I hate it, that's keeping me up at night or makes me nervous. Is that okay? So the stuff that makes me nervous. So by the way, when we were doing our DAS and Unmanned stuff, the Secretary of the Navy said, "Hey, come up with a plan. Come up with a roadmap for the Department of the Navy." We did that, by the way. It's out there. I do lose sleep over it, and and my therapist says I have to get over it. But that plan was out there, and so I think that it's the type of thing that can demonstrate to the folks out there that the Navy has been thinking about some of these things for a long time, and the unmanned task force, can use that to help to help point them in the direction so that they don't waste a lot of time. But who's thinking about all the other stuff that unmanned systems are going to require? Because if I used to say that when we would see an unmanned air vehicle, right, and everybody would watch the thing take off, and the beauty about that is you'd always be able to look at it. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now, looking at an imaginary air vehicle as it takes off, right? And I used to look around at everybody and say, hey, don't forget, we solved the miracle of flight over 100 years ago. That hasn't changed. But how to talk to that thing, how to understand what the intent of that thing is, okay? How close does it have to be to becoming a sentient, piece of gear out there? These are the things that Alinda, has been talking about. That's really, really hard. The other thing that I found very, very disconcerting was if you had an unmanned underwater vehicle, you don't even get to see it. You have no idea. You saw it on top of the water, it disappeared, and then everybody just walks away. And you wait a couple of hours, and then you wait for it to come back. You better hope that it has some data, right? That for you to do something with, because you don't even get a chance, to see that kind of stuff. Well, how is it going to get recharged? How is it going to get retasked? How are you going to get to it to stop doing something? Let's just say it was armed, right? How are you going to get to that thing to abort a mission? Okay, these are some tough questions to ask. So who's looking at the hard stuff? So real quick, DAU, my command, can help you do those contract things. We've got great folks like Michelle Courier and Hallie Balkin out there that can help you with those other sorts of authorities that you need out there. The Naval Postgraduate School is another place that I think that needs to be involved here. They have people that think about the ethics of this, but they also have access to industry and academia, but they have access to the Department of the Navy, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and we got to tap into them as well. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think just because it's on the same topic for you, I'm going to toss this to you real quick. There was a question about data. So regarding data, can you help us cut through the ATO process? And I'm actually putting a link in the chat. I'm hoping somebody from the Capital Factory team who's able to communicate with our guests here could forward. I just Googled some stuff. I will say Google has more information than I feel like I do as a defense professional. But Frank, do you know of anything else in this area?
If we're talking about ATOs, there's only two ATOs that I know. The kind that that I loved, as a young Marine, and that was the Air Tasking Order, right? And hopefully that I'm going to have a mission on that. We're not talking about that one. We're talking about the authority to operate, which is, man, I think, I'll say it. I'll probably lose my job here. We've got the wrong people in charge of that kind of stuff. That's the issue right now. They've got nothing to lose by saying no, and they don't. Actually, you know what? Instead of putting them in a bad light, what we need to do is just like you started off, Whitney. We need to have them see their part in it. Okay. And it's not the mission execution piece. It's how we get there. Without their help, we can't get there as fast as we need to go. And we are falling behind. We need that community to help step up and take the risk with us, trust us, and give us the authority to operate out there so that we can exercise these systems, get them in the hands of sailors and Marines.
Thanks, Frank. Mike?
So I'll just the thing that keeps me up at night is the pace or lack thereof. We're in the context of a great power competition. We're dealing with technologies on an exponential trajectory, yet we were linear and maybe even flat in some situations. We simply aren't moving fast enough. The winner of the next conflict will be the one, not necessarily with the best tech, but the fastest adopters. It's like the person in your calculus class, I'm going to date myself, that figured out how to use that TI-85, calculator, and then that was the person you went to because that little machine could help you solve problems quicker. So the thing, I'm just worried about pace. As the CNO said, speed matters. We're in a race and we're in danger of losing if we don't pick up the pace. So that's the thing that I'm worried about. And I appreciate, the Naval X's of the world and the DAUs and the warfare centers that are helping hack the bureaucracy to get guys like me some really, and really interesting stuff. The technology's here. It's just get it into our hands so we can help solve our problems quickly. So I just wanted to kind of take General Kelly's thought just one step further.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll add my biggest fear is pretty similar to what you guys were saying, but mine is it's not so much on the speed, although that's the result. For me, it's the lack of coordination with people who are mission aligned. So I think we have solutions in industry and academia that would help us today. I think one group in the Department of Navy, and maybe the Marine Corps has an answer to something that the Navy is still struggling with. One of our shipyards can't get a ship out quickly enough because somebody who solved the problem across the coast hasn't, cut through the bureaucracy and found that group. And that is stuff I think about it. And part of the problem there is, what we were talking about communications, Alinda, and how people work together. It kind of feels like a Frankenstein sort of situation where our team maybe is all there, but every piece kind of has a different background and something else that annoys it. One is allergic to nuts and one is not. I don't know. But for some reason, we're having a really hard time working as a functional team and hand in hand with our other just as crazy partners. I think where it's not just us, it's other governments that are having a hard time aligning. It's other groups that are having a hard time acting at speed. And I think the scariest thing for me about that is there are some really small groups of people that are not protecting millions and billions of lives who are able to move faster than us because they only have to work with a few folks and they can do a lot of damage. And we've seen that recently. I mean, we've seen a lot of isolated incidents of small terrorist groups and otherwise. And they can move faster than we can because there's only a few of them and they're coordinated. We're way more powerful. We're way more capable. We're way more, I think our people have a lot more to fight for in terms of protecting each other and protecting our country and protecting the world. But if we don't act like a team and start letting people take their roles and, getting at least enough understanding of the other person to not isolate them, even when it comes to ATOs, there's a reason they're jacked over there. What it is, I don't think it's what they ate for breakfast. There's probably some ways that their hands are tied and our hands are tied that is preventing us from putting them together. But I'm hoping that we can function as a better team and not let the pendulum swing every time someone gets burned by trying to do things differently, but to really stay connected and keep sharing lessons learned and keep each other in touch, even if we accidentally burn each other. Because it does happen in industry. Folks who are still on the line, I'm sure you've gotten burned by at least one government organization, and please don't give up on working with us, because we really need the help. So I'm going to turn over to Brian on that happy note.
No problem, Whitney. Wow, this was a really great discussion. Very challenging. You can see there's a lot of stuff going on out there. As you can see, there are no shortages of challenges in the maritime domain. For us, when I say us, I mean the Navy and Marine Corps team, in the whole community. The tech is more than just about opportunity. It's about saving lives. And I hope that someone who tuned in today can help the Navy and Marine Corps team. In a day full of amazing speakers, we've learned so much. What was your favorite part? Did anyone connect with any founders? Let us know in the chat. This brings us to the close of Naval X Track and the end of Fed Supernova. Thank you to our speakers and our attendees for tuning into this event. If you'd like to reach out to any of the speakers, please see their profile on the fedsupernova.com.